Tom, do you know something funny about many English learners? They spend years studying vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation, but when they finally get a chance to speak with someone, they suddenly start talking twice as fast as normal. It's almost like their brain is afraid the English will disappear if they don't say everything immediately.
I know exactly what you mean because I used to do that all the time. Whenever I met a foreign visitor or had a chance to speak English in public, I would become nervous and try to say everything as quickly as possible. At the time, I honestly believed that fast speaking sounded more fluent and more professional.
That's actually a very common belief. Many learners think that native speakers always talk quickly, so they try to copy the speed before they master the clarity. The problem is that communication becomes difficult when people are focused on speed instead of understanding.
Looking back now, I can see that clearly, but a few months ago, I didn't realize it at all. In fact, I was so confident about my opinion that I even argued with you about it while we were sitting in a coffee shop one afternoon.
Oh, yes. I remember that conversation very well. We had just finished recording a podcast episode, and somehow we started discussing English speaking habits. I remember telling you that most learners would sound better if they simply slowed down a little.
And I immediately disagreed. I remember saying that speaking quickly made people sound more advanced because that's what I had always believed. The funny thing is that I had absolutely no evidence to support my argument.
You were very confident for someone with no evidence.
That's true. Sometimes confidence arrives before intelligence.
That's probably one of the most honest things you've ever said.
Thank you. At least I'm honest about my mistakes now. Back then, however, I was completely convinced that I was right. I thought that if someone spoke slowly, people might think their English was weak.
That's when I suggested the challenge.
Exactly. You looked at me, smiled, and said, "Why don't we test your theory in real life instead of arguing about it?" At first, I thought it was a great idea because I was expecting to win.
You were very excited about winning.
Extremely excited.
Too excited.
Probably.
The challenge itself was actually very simple. For 1 week, we would pay attention to real conversations and compare the results. Sometimes we would intentionally speak faster, and other times we would speak more slowly and clearly. Then we would observe how people reacted.
It sounded easy enough. Honestly, I expected the results to prove my point within a day or two.
Unfortunately for you, reality had other plans.
Reality is often very rude.
That's true.
The first real test happened the following Saturday morning. We decided to visit a popular outdoor market near the city center because many tourists visited that area every weekend. We thought it would be a perfect place to practice conversations and observe how communication worked in real life.
It was a beautiful morning. The weather was warm, but not too hot. Musicians were playing on the streets. People were walking around with coffee cups in their hands, and every food stand seemed to have a long line of customers.
I remember feeling surprisingly confident that day. Maybe too confident. As we walked through the market, I kept talking about how important speed was in communication. Looking back now, I probably sounded like a motivational speaker giving a presentation called The Power of Talking Too Fast.
That's actually exactly what you sounded like.
Thank you for your support.
You're welcome.
Anyway, about 30 minutes after we arrived, something interesting happened. We were standing near a bakery when a tourist approached us holding a city map. He looked friendly, but he also looked slightly confused, which usually means one thing.
He was lost.
Very lost. He smiled and asked if we could help him find a famous museum that was located on the other side of the city.
It was the perfect opportunity for our experiment because he needed clear directions. This wasn't just casual conversation. He genuinely needed information that he could understand and follow.
Exactly. Before you could answer, I stepped forward because I was eager to demonstrate my superior communication skills.
Superior according to you.
Correct.
Continue.
So, I started explaining the directions. The route itself wasn't very complicated. It involved walking to the train station, taking one train line, and then walking a short distance to the museum. It should have taken less than 30 seconds to explain.
But that's not what happened.
Not even close. The moment I started speaking, my nervousness returned. Even though I knew the answer, I suddenly felt pressure to sound fluent. As a result, I began speaking much faster than normal.
I remember watching the tourist's face while you were talking. At first, he looked interested, then he looked confused, and finally, he looked completely lost.
The worst part was that I didn't notice.
Not at all.
I kept talking and talking, believing that I was doing an excellent job. Meanwhile, the tourist was slowly entering another dimension.
That's actually exactly what you sounded like.
When I finally finished explaining everything, there was a long silence.
A very long silence.
The tourist smiled politely and said, "I'm sorry, but could you repeat that a little more slowly?"
That sentence should have been a warning sign.
It definitely should have been. Unfortunately, my brain interpreted it differently. Instead of slowing down, I somehow thought I needed to explain everything again with even more detail.
Which made things worse.
Much worse.
Much, much worse.
Thank you, Emily.
You're welcome.
After my second explanation, the tourist looked at the map, looked at me, and then looked at the map again, as if he was trying to solve a difficult puzzle.
At that point, I decided to help.
Which was probably the right decision.
I smiled and explained the same directions, but this time I spoke slowly. I paused between important points, used simple vocabulary, and made sure he understood each step before moving to the next one.
The difference was incredible. Within less than a minute, the tourist understood everything clearly.
He even repeated the directions back to us correctly.
Which meant the information had actually been communicated successfully.
Exactly. That's when I asked you an important question.
I remember.
I asked, which explanation was more fluent?
At first, I didn't want to answer.
Because you knew the answer.
Unfortunately, yes.
And what was the answer?
The slower explanation.
Why?
Because fluency isn't about how quickly words leave your mouth. It's about how effectively your message reaches another person's mind.
That's a lesson many English learners never hear.
And honestly, that conversation was only the beginning. What happened later that afternoon was even more surprising because I encountered another situation where speaking too fast created a problem that I never expected.
That's when we met the elderly tourist near the train station.
Exactly. And that conversation completely changed the way I thought about English speaking forever.
After our first experiment at the market, I thought you might finally admit that speaking slowly was often more effective than speaking quickly. However, when we left the bakery and continued walking through the market, I noticed something interesting. You still looked unconvinced.
That's because one example wasn't enough for me. Deep down, I still believed that fast speaking had advantages. I told myself that maybe the tourist was tired, distracted, or unfamiliar with the area. I wasn't ready to change my opinion yet.
I remember that. You kept finding excuses.
Exactly. Human beings are surprisingly creative when it comes to protecting their own opinions. Even when evidence appears right in front of us, we often try to explain it away.
That's true. So we continued walking and decided to observe more real-life conversations.
The market was becoming busier by the minute. Families were shopping, tourists were taking photos, musicians were performing on street corners, and food vendors were calling out to customers. It was a perfect place to study communication because people from many different backgrounds were interacting with each other.
As we walked, I started paying attention to something very interesting. The people who seemed easiest to understand were not necessarily the fastest speakers.
That's right. In fact, some of the clearest communicators were speaking at a very comfortable pace. They weren't rushing, but they weren't speaking unnaturally slowly either. They simply spoke clearly and confidently.
About an hour later, we decided to take a break and grab coffee near the train station.
And that's where everything changed for me.
Exactly.
We found a small cafe near the station and sat outside where we could watch people passing by. While we were drinking coffee, an elderly tourist approached our table. He looked friendly but slightly concerned.
He was holding a guidebook.
Yes, and he politely asked if we knew where the nearest ticket machine was located because he wanted to buy a train ticket.
Another simple question.
Very simple.
Another opportunity for communication.
Unfortunately for me, yes.
Before you could answer, I volunteered again. At that moment, I was determined to prove that I could communicate successfully.
I remember thinking, this should be interesting.
So, I smiled and started explaining. The ticket machine was actually very close.
It was located just inside the station entrance, next to an information desk.
Easy directions.
Extremely easy directions. Yet somehow I managed to make them sound complicated.
That's a special talent.
Thank you, I think.
You're welcome.
As I explained, I noticed the tourist leaning slightly forward.
Which usually means someone is trying very hard to understand.
Exactly. Unfortunately, instead of slowing down, I became even more nervous. The harder he tried to understand me, the faster I spoke.
That's something many learners do. They see confusion on the listener's face and react by speaking faster instead of speaking clearer.
Looking back now, that's exactly what happened. I thought speed would somehow fix the problem.
But it didn't.
Not even a little. After listening for about 20 seconds, the tourist smiled politely and said, "I'm sorry, my hearing isn't very good. Could you say that again?"
That was an important moment.
It really was. Suddenly, I realized something that I had completely ignored before. Communication isn't only about the speaker. It's also about the listener.
That's such a valuable lesson.
The listener may be tired, distracted, unfamiliar with the language, or even have difficulty hearing. If we truly want to communicate, we need to make things easier for them rather than harder.
Exactly.
This time, before I could repeat myself, you gently stepped in.
I remember smiling and saying, "Of course." Then I explained the directions slowly and clearly. I used short sentences, natural pauses, and simple vocabulary.
The difference was immediate.
The tourist nodded after almost every sentence.
And when you finished speaking, he understood everything perfectly.
He even thanked us and repeated the directions back correctly,
After he left, I sat quietly for a moment.
which was unusual.
Very unusual.
Normally, you always have something to say.
That's true.
So I knew you were thinking about something important.
I was. For the first time, I started questioning my entire understanding of fluency. I realized that I had spent years trying to sound fluent instead of trying to communicate effectively.
That's a huge difference.
It really is. Many learners focus on appearance rather than results. They want to sound advanced, but they forget that the real goal is understanding.
Exactly.
As we continued our conversation, another interesting thing happened. We began listening carefully to the people around us.
Yes, and we noticed patterns.
Very clear patterns. The shop owners who interacted with customers all day spoke at a comfortable pace. The tour guides who gave instructions to visitors spoke clearly and paused between important points. Even the train station employees used simple language and steady speech.
None of them sounded rushed.
Not at all.
Yet they were excellent communicators.
Better communicators than many people who spoke much faster.
That's when I asked you another question.
I remember.
I asked, who sounds more professional? Someone who speaks quickly but causes confusion, or someone who speaks clearly and helps people understand?
The answer was obvious.
Very obvious.
The clear speaker.
Exactly.
Around that time, something funny happened that made the lesson even more memorable.
Oh yes, the sandwich incident.
Please don't remind me.
I absolutely will.
Fine.
We decided to order lunch from a food stand near the station. The menu was simple, and there were only a few customers waiting.
Everything should have gone smoothly.
It should have.
But I was still thinking about our communication experiment. My mind was distracted and I rushed through my order.
Very rushed.
Extremely rushed.
So rushed that the employee stopped you after about 3 seconds.
That's correct.
And what did she say?
She smiled politely and said, "Could you repeat that a little more slowly?" The worst part wasn't that she couldn't understand me.
What was the worst part?
She was a native speaker of my own language. Exactly.
So your problem wasn't English.
Apparently not.
Your problem was speed.
That realization was painful.
But also helpful.
Very helpful.
Because it proved that communication problems aren't always language problems. Sometimes they're simply communication problems.
That's a great point. Even in our native language, speaking too quickly can create misunderstandings.
Exactly.
After lunch, I decided to try something different. Instead of focusing on speaking quickly, I focused on speaking clearly.
A revolutionary idea.
Apparently.
What happened?
To my surprise, conversations became easier. People asked me to repeat myself less often. I felt calmer while speaking, and most importantly, I noticed that listeners seemed more comfortable.
That's because clear communication creates confidence.
Exactly. When people understand you, conversations become more enjoyable.
And when conversations become enjoyable, confidence naturally grows.
That's a lesson I wish I had learned years earlier.
Better late than never.
Very true.
By the end of the day, you seemed like a completely different person.
I felt different too. For the first time, I wasn't trying to impress people with speed. I was trying to connect with them through clarity.
That's a beautiful way to describe it.
Thank you.
But the most important test was still waiting for you.
Ah, yes.
The workplace challenge.
The challenge that completely changed my opinion forever.
Because a few days later, you had an important meeting.
A meeting where clear communication mattered much more than sounding impressive.
And what happened during that meeting taught both of us something we'll never forget. After spending an entire day discovering that clear communication was often more effective than fast communication, I honestly thought our little experiment was finished. We had already learned some valuable lessons from the market, the train station, and even the sandwich incident.
Please stop bringing up the sandwich incident.
Absolutely not. It's too funny to ignore.
Fair enough.
Anyway, a few days later, something happened that neither of us expected. It wasn't a tourist asking for directions. It wasn't a casual conversation. It was a real-life situation where communication actually mattered.
That's right. I had an important meeting at work.
And if I remember correctly, you were extremely nervous about it.
Extremely nervous is actually an understatement. For almost a week, I had been preparing for that meeting because I was going to present a project update to several managers and team members.
Public speaking always makes people nervous.
Exactly. Even people who are confident in everyday conversations can become nervous when they have to speak in front of a group. The pressure feels different because everyone is listening to you at the same time.
I think many listeners can relate to that feeling.
Definitely. The night before the meeting, I reviewed my notes several times. I practiced my presentation, checked the information, and tried to prepare for possible questions.
Sounds responsible.
It was, but there was one problem.
What was that?
Every time I practiced, I kept speaking too quickly.
Ah.
Even when I was alone in my room, I rushed through entire sections of the presentation.
Why do you think that happened?
Because I was nervous. Deep down, I thought speaking quickly would make me sound more professional.
Even after everything we learned at the market?
Unfortunately, yes.
Old habits are difficult to break.
Very difficult.
So what happened on the day of the meeting?
I arrived at work earlier than usual. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock, but I arrived around 9.
Smart decision.
I wanted time to relax and organize my thoughts. I made a cup of coffee, reviewed my notes one final time, and then sat quietly at my desk.
Were you still nervous?
Absolutely.
I think that's normal.
It is. The interesting thing is that while I was sitting there, I suddenly remembered our conversations from the previous week.
About speaking slowly?
Exactly.
What specifically did you remember?
I remembered the tourist who couldn't understand my directions. I remembered the elderly man at the train station. I remembered the food stand employee asking me to repeat myself.
The evidence was starting to add up.
Definitely. Then I asked myself a simple question.
What question?
Do I want people to be impressed by my speed, or do I want people to understand my message?
That's a powerful question.
And the answer was obvious.
Understanding.
Exactly.
So what did you decide?
I decided that during the meeting, I would intentionally slow down.
That sounds simple, but I imagine it wasn't easy.
Not at all. When people are nervous, their natural instinct is often to speed up.
Very true.
A few minutes later, everyone entered the meeting room. Some people carried laptops, some carried notebooks, and everyone seemed focused on the discussion ahead.
How many people were there?
Around 12 people.
That's a decent-sized audience.
Large enough to make me nervous. The meeting began and several team members presented updates before it was my turn.
Did that help calm your nerves?
Not really. In fact, waiting made me even more nervous.
That's understandable.
Finally, my manager looked at me and said, "Tom, would you like to give us your update?"
The moment had arrived.
Exactly.
What happened next?
For a brief second, I felt the familiar urge to rush.
The old habit.
Yes, my brain wanted to speak quickly, finish the presentation, and escape the situation as fast as possible.
But you didn't?
No,
Why?
because I remembered something important.
What?
Communication is not a race.
I love that.
So before speaking,
I took a slow breath.
Smart.
Then I looked around the room, smiled, and began speaking at a comfortable pace.
How did it feel?
Strange at first,
Why?
because when you're nervous, speaking slowly feels slow.
That's true.
But after a minute or two, something surprising happened.
What?
People were paying attention.
Interesting.
Nobody looked confused, nobody asked me to repeat myself, nobody interrupted because they missed important information.
That's a good sign.
A very good sign.
Did you notice anything else?
Yes. Because I was speaking more slowly, I actually felt calmer.
That makes sense.
Instead of rushing from one idea to the next, I had time to think about what I wanted to say.
So your speech became clearer
Much clearer.
and probably more confident, too.
Exactly.
That's something many learners don't realize. Speaking slowly often makes you sound more confident, not less confident.
I completely agree.
What happened after the presentation?
That's where things became really interesting.
Tell me.
After I finished, my manager asked a few questions about the project.
Were they difficult questions?
Not particularly difficult, but they required thoughtful answers.
And because you weren't rushing, you had time to think.
Exactly.
That's a huge advantage.
It really is. Instead of immediately blurting out the first answer that came into my head, I paused briefly and responded carefully.
Which probably made your answers stronger.
Definitely.
How did the meeting end?
Very positively. After everyone finished speaking, the meeting ended and people started leaving the room.
Did anyone say anything?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Don't worry, this time it was good.
Okay, now I'm curious.
One of my coworkers walked over and said, "Your presentation was very clear today."
Wow.
Another coworker said something similar a few minutes later.
That's amazing.
The funny thing is that neither person mentioned speed.
Of course not,
They mentioned clarity.
because that's what actually mattered.
Exactly.
How did that make you feel?
Honestly, it completely changed my perspective.
In what way?
For years, I had associated fluency with speed, but that meeting showed me that people value understanding far more than speed.
That's such an important lesson,
It really is.
especially for English learners.
Absolutely. Many learners spend so much energy trying to sound fluent that they accidentally make communication more difficult.
When slowing down could actually make them sound better.
Exactly.
Looking back now, what do you think was the biggest lesson from the entire experiment?
I think the biggest lesson was this: speaking slowly is not a sign of weakness.
That's powerful.
Speaking clearly, choosing your words carefully, and making sure people understand you requires confidence.
I completely agree.
Fast speech might impress people for a few seconds,
But clear speech helps people understand you.
and understanding is the real goal of communication.
That's a perfect way to say it.
Thank you.
And I think that leads perfectly into our final discussion.
Which is?
Why speaking slowly and clearly can improve not only your English, but also your confidence, your relationships, and your success in everyday life.
That's a conversation every listener should hear.
Absolutely. Before we finish today's episode, I'd like everyone listening to think about something for a moment. Have you ever been in a conversation where the other person spoke so quickly that you understood almost nothing, even though you technically knew all the words they were using? Maybe it happened in English, or maybe it even happened in your native language.
I think almost everyone has experienced that situation. Sometimes the speaker believes they're communicating effectively because they're saying a lot of words, but communication isn't measured by the number of words we say. Communication is measured by how much the listener understands.
That's such an important distinction. Throughout today's story, we've talked about tourists, train stations, coffee shops, and workplace meetings, but all of those situations shared one common lesson. The people who communicated best were not necessarily the fastest speakers, they were the clearest speakers.
Exactly. And when I think about my own experience, I realize that I spent years chasing the wrong goal. I thought fluency meant speaking quickly. I thought confidence meant speaking without pauses. I thought successful communication meant filling every second with words.
But now you see it differently.
Completely differently. Today, if someone asks me what fluency means, my answer is much simpler.
Fluency means expressing your ideas clearly enough that other people can understand you without struggling.
I love that definition because it focuses on the purpose of language. The purpose of language isn't to impress people. The purpose of language is to connect with people.
That's exactly right. Think about the best teachers you've ever had. Think about the best managers, the best presenters, the best leaders, or even the best friends you've known. Most of them probably weren't famous for speaking quickly.
That's true.
They were famous for being easy to understand.
And that's something every English learner should remember. When you're practicing speaking, your goal shouldn't be to sound like an auctioneer who speaks 1,000 words per minute. Your goal should be to communicate ideas comfortably and naturally.
That's a great image.
Thank you.
The funny thing is that many learners become nervous because they compare themselves to native speakers in movies, television shows, or fast-paced interviews.
That's a very common mistake.
In those situations, people often speak quickly because they're comfortable, familiar with the topic, and speaking with people who share the same cultural background.
Exactly. But if you watch those same native speakers in situations where clarity matters, you'll notice something interesting.
They slow down.
They absolutely do. Teachers slow down when explaining difficult ideas. Doctors slow down when discussing important information with patients. Customer service representatives slow down when helping confused customers. Tour guides slow down when giving directions.
Because understanding becomes the priority.
Exactly.
One thing that surprised me during our experiment was discovering how much confidence comes from slowing down. At first, I thought speaking slowly would make me appear less fluent. Instead, the opposite happened.
That's such an important point.
When I slowed down, I had more time to think. I chose better words. My pronunciation improved naturally. I made fewer mistakes. And because people understood me better, my confidence increased.
It's almost like a positive cycle.
It really is. Clear speaking creates better communication. Better communication creates more confidence. More confidence creates more opportunities to practice. And more practice leads to improvement.
That's a wonderful cycle to build.
Definitely.
Another thing I'd like to discuss is something many learners don't realize. Sometimes people speak quickly because they're afraid of silence.
That's true.
I used to think that.
Many people do, but pauses are actually a normal and healthy part of communication. Even experienced speakers pause occasionally to think, organize their ideas, or emphasize important points.
Exactly. During my workplace presentation, I noticed that when I paused briefly, nobody thought I was struggling. In fact, those pauses probably made you sound more professional.
I believe so. The pauses gave people time to process the information. They also gave me time to organize my thoughts.
That's why listeners should never be afraid of small pauses when speaking English. A short pause is much better than rushing through a sentence that nobody understands.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about something practical. Imagine a listener wants to improve their speaking skills starting tomorrow morning. What would you recommend?
I'd recommend something very simple. Choose a topic you know well and spend 5 minutes talking about it out loud.
Such as?
Your daily routine, your favorite food, your hometown, your job, your hobbies, or your plans for the weekend.
That's a great idea because the topic is already familiar.
Exactly. Then focus on one thing only: clarity.
Not speed.
Definitely not speed.
Just clarity.
Speak at a comfortable pace. Pronounce words carefully. Imagine you're explaining something to a friend who genuinely wants to understand you.
That's such a useful exercise.
It really works. And if possible, record yourself occasionally.
Many people don't like hearing their own voice.
Neither did I. But recordings can teach you a lot. Sometimes we think we're speaking clearly until we hear ourselves later.
That's very true.
When you listen to recordings, don't focus on sounding perfect. Instead, ask yourself simple questions. Was I easy to understand? Was my pronunciation clear? Did I rush through important information?
Those are much more useful questions than asking whether you sound like a native speaker.
Exactly.
Because the goal is communication, not perfection.
That's one of the biggest lessons from today's story.
I completely agree.
You know, something else happened after that workplace presentation.
Really?
Yes. A few weeks later, I noticed that I was enjoying conversations more than before.
Why do you think that happened?
Because I stopped treating every conversation like an exam. Instead of constantly judging my own performance, I focused on connecting with the other person.
That's a huge mindset shift.
It really is. When you're constantly worrying about mistakes, you miss the actual conversation. But when you focus on communication, conversations become more natural and enjoyable.
And people can feel that difference.
Absolutely.
Listeners, if there's one thing we'd like you to remember from today's episode, it's this. You do not need to speak fast to sound fluent.
You do not need complicated vocabulary to sound intelligent.
You do not need perfect grammar to have meaningful conversations.
What you need is clarity.
Clarity helps people understand you.
Clarity builds confidence.
Clarity creates better relationships.
Clarity opens opportunities.
And most importantly, clarity allows your ideas to reach other people.
Because communication is not about showing people how much English you know.
It's about helping people understand what you're trying to say.
That's the real purpose of language.
Before we say goodbye, we'd like to give everyone listening a small challenge.
A very simple challenge.
For the next 7 days, whenever you practice speaking English, make one promise to yourself.
Don't try to speak faster.
Try to speak clearer.
Slow down a little.
Pronounce your words carefully.
Allow yourself to pause when necessary.
Focus on communication instead of speed.
And notice how people respond.
You might be surprised by the results.
Just like I was.
Looking back now, the biggest lesson from our experiment wasn't really about English.
That's true.
It was about communication.
And communication is one of the most valuable skills anyone can develop.
Whether you're speaking English, your native language, talking to friends, helping customers, presenting at work, or meeting new people, the ability to communicate clearly will always be valuable.
Very valuable.
So remember our message today.
Speak slowly.
Speak clearly.
Let people understand your ideas.
Let your confidence grow naturally.
And trust that clear communication will always take you further than fast communication.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation.
We hope you learned something useful.
And most importantly, we hope you feel more confident about your English journey.
And remember,
Speak slowly.
speak clearly.
We'll see you in the next episode of TalkMaster English Channel.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Goodbye. Happy English learning.